Good morning. This is the first in a new series of podcasts. I'm Peter Jobe and I'm the CEO of Intergence. We're based in Cambridge, and I'm delighted today to have Shemi Alcott with me, who we met a few years ago, actually, Shemi, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
And the story behind it is that my nephew, Chris, was very lucky in that he was selected to go on an AICC training course, which Shemi was running.
That's
And
the Amateur Inter-Club Championship.
that's the one. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Bit of a tongue teaser.
Yeah, and Chris had never raced before, and he actually did rather well, didn't he? I think
He's one of those really insanely annoying, naturally talented people, but that really takes positive critique and implements it straight away. So you're just moving at really fast pace through his progression. And I mean, I reckon I could have made him a downhill ski racer if he'd committed to it within another, few years.
He's incredible at that sort of thing. He's, as you say, he's a naturally talented sportsman. So he went and did very well. And obviously, I was impressed by watching your ability to train and coach people. So I thought, well, actually, perhaps you can come and help coach and train us as well. And we were talking about data, and we have a number of mutual interests, sustainability being one, and data being another.
Yep.
So, today is very much about data, sustainability, and I'm obviously keen to know more about some of the latest trends in elite sport, because obviously Shemi presents Ski Sunday on BBC Two. Every week during the ski season, or every other week during the ski season. So there's a lot of similarities between what we're trying to do as a business in terms of understanding data and providing more clarity on data, and also some of the things that elite sports are trying to do. So I thought we'd start right at the beginning, Shemi, and ask you how you actually got into skiing in the first place, really.
So I didn't really have a choice. My dad was a former professional rugby player and my mum was a swimmer. So I always say I got his glutes and her lungs, and I was made to be this mountain creature. But by the time I was born, my elder brothers had been talent ID'd by the French Ski School. They're 8 and 4 years older than me. And my eldest one, Alex, was very good. And so they'd already kind of poached him to get into racing. So I was born already kind of going around the race circuit and then learning to ski at 18 months old, doing my first race at 3, which I always told people I won. I've got this teddy with a gold medal around its neck that my older brother called Rufus pulled the eyes out of, and I remember it was destroying for me. So I've got this beautiful teddy with no eyes but a gold medal. And I always tell people, that was the start of my skiing career, my success, and winning that race at 3. And it took my dad about 25 years of reading this in the press to call me and say, "You've got to stop telling people you won that race at 3. I was like, "What do you mean? I've got a gold medal." And he said, "You were so far away from winning that race." And I said, "Well, come on, I must have been fast. I went on to race for Winter Olympics." And he said, "No, you weren't fast at all. In fact, you were so slow, you stopped to give me a kiss on the way down." And it was back in the day. We're not talking camera phones. We're talking those big, bulky things. And my dad's at the side of the race filming. And I'm following my mum down at 3 years old. And I see him, and you see me come over all the way over to him. And he's like, "Quick, go that way." And I give him a kiss. And he's like, "Okay, back in the race now." And he said that everyone under the age of 5 got a gold medal. So that really put me in my place, because I thought, I was that kind of Mozart child prodigy destined for success. But it did start early on. And I think we made quite a lot of commitments as a family to be in the mountains, because you do need volume on your skis. But it was definitely a holiday thing. We've got a small apartment in Flaine, in France. So I took my common entrance exams a year early and went to live out there thinking I was going to a ski school, whereas in actual fact I was only skiing Wednesday afternoons and Sundays, and no one in this village school spoke English. I remember crying every day. It was very good for my resilience levels, and I remember not understanding anything at all. And the first Wednesday I was like, I was also the only girl in the school.
Yes.
And the first Wednesday we went skiing in the afternoon, and I'm going to keep up with all these guys. I'm going to show them. Like, I might have been struggling at school because I have no clue how to communicate, but I'm going to be fast. And we were skiing around, and then on about the 10th lap of different places in the resort, one of the lifties, and they kept shouting at me, these guys. And I was like, I don't know what they're saying, but I can keep up. I thought they were kind of challenging me. And one of the lifties who finally spoke English said, "Shemi, these boys, they need to go for a pee, so they're asking you to wait so that they can go for a pee." And I'd been chasing them down, thinking it was a competition. And I think that says quite a lot about my personality as a as a young girl, and actually it's something I'm quite passionate about because I was really driven to be a great ski racer. I went to New Zealand on my own when I was 10 for every winter till I was 18. I was really obsessively focused, and I wasn't afraid to tell people that I wanted to be the best. And I think that's something that I was probably the last generation of young girls who not was allowed to, but was comfortable in being that vocal and that ambitious.
Right.
Because nowadays, unfortunately, being that highly driven at that young an age is almost seen as arrogance as a young girl. It's really quite worrying.
Interesting, because I remember you telling me about your passion for the mountains, which always comes across with all of the stuff you do. But it isn't just about passion; it's about ability. But also the other thing is having that drive, isn't it? Which is really important. So
I think actually, I'd say technically, I was never a great skier. You have naturally talented athletes like Chris, but actually, if they come from Britain and it's a tough sport to choose. We don't have mountains on our doorsteps. You've got to have a huge amount of ability to sacrifice the rest of your life to commit to this dream. And actually, having too much natural talent, I've noticed in the sport, it doesn't pave the way for you to have that longevity in your career. Whereas I wasn't technically very good, but I believed in myself and I skied really fast. And I remember one of my coaches saying to me, "Oh, you should ski like your teammate. She skis much better than you." And I said, "But I'm beating her by 2 seconds a run. Why would I change my technique to be slower, which looks better?" And he kept trying, and eventually we parted ways. And actually I found a coach who really empowered me in my individuality, because I think that is one of the best things about skiing. There isn't a biomechanical body shape that works for it. These talent ID programs are amazing. We've had now, if you're tall, you're going to be a basketball player or a rower. You can go to these days and they'll tell you what sport you should do. Well, in skiing, in World Cup slalom men's skiing, we've got an athlete called Albert Popov, who's 5'3". And then we've got Ramon Zainhausen, who's 6'7". They're starting next to each other in the start gate. It's almost comical, but it embraces every different body shape. You just have to learn how to be coached. And that's what I got in my career, because I got coaches who believed in the different way that I skied and didn't try and mold me into the perfect technique. And that's what I love about skiing and also about coaching, because it's not one shoe fits all. It's what does this individual need? And it's kind of the same for you with your business and data. There isn't a set pathway that everyone follows. And we think there is. We can Google everything now. How can we be the best at this? And you want to see a kind of structured 1 to 10 program to follow. Yeah. But actually what people need to do is look inside and think, what do I need to do individually to be my very best?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So tell me a little bit about the way the sport has kind of progressed and changed in the last 10 years. Because obviously, you've got all these top athletes using data more. You were doing what you could with what you had at the time.
Yeah.
What differences have you seen, obviously, because you're still very closely involved in the sport?
I think I was probably the very start of using more science to be my best. I mean, I remember we used to have a heart rate monitor and we'd have to wear it for 8 minutes lying down when we woke up, and then stood up for 8 minutes, and we looked at the heart rate fluctuation and that looked at our fatigue levels. That was a big change, because it used to be you wake up and you filled out a form. How tired am I feeling today? How good? And you had to try and be honest about it. Whereas this is, you can't hide behind data. This is data showing, and especially as a woman, especially as a woman, going through that menstrual cycle, it was really important for me to see when I should be lifting heavier weights, when I should be doing higher volume at altitude, because there was a correlation at the kind of end of my career between ACLs and women who are menstruating. And so it was really important to take all that. Yeah, because when you are menstruating, you haven't got the core strength. So then you tend to be a bit looser. You don't have as much control and power through the turn. So that was really important to put forward. Now, the difficulty with that is you can't control when the races are. So you just have to manage what you can do in that situation. So the science was starting to come. But then, I remember being around the mountains about 5 years ago as a retired athlete, and seeing everyone wearing these. I tried to make you wear one of these, actually.
You did,
do you remember?
yes.
They're
you
like
failed.
bras that go on top, and it tracks. It's like a GPS tracker, but it's got your heart rate in it. It's got how you're recovering on your lift ride. Because the thing about skiing is it's very intense for 2 minutes. So you go out your start gate, your heart rate's going to be 160 for 2 minutes, very high. But then you have the whole lift ride back to recover. And it's about how we can promote that recovery and looking at the altitude and the oxygen levels. So there's loads more now. And I think that's really interesting because the progression of winter sports, not just alpine, is so huge at the moment that injuries are always behind every door. So if you know that you're doing everything to physically be the best and looking at all of this data, even if it's a psychological trust in the process, that will give you the confidence, even if it's not actually going to stop you, because if you do get injured, sometimes there's nothing you could have done differently. But actually, if you know, right, okay, yes, I'm injured, but I had done everything I could beforehand, I'd followed all the pathways to be my best, then you kind of have to make peace with it.
Yeah. So obviously, Shami, data is really close to my heart as well. So is there anything from a data perspective you think would really have helped you during your career?
There is a massive thing. My whole career, coaches always said to me, how much pressure have you got on your inside ski? And I'm like, well, I don't really know. And that turns back to having foot surgery. I was born with banana-shaped bones in my feet, and so I had them broken and realigned. I was in a wheelchair for a while, but I don't have sensors on the outside of my feet. So when they said to me, how much pressure have you got on? It was kind of an airy answer of, I think I've got some. I think I've got more, because actually how technology has changed when we ski is that I always say we used to have this Oscar winner, The Outside Edge. It was all about the outside edge. But nowadays, if you watch a movie with a great Oscar winner and the supporting actor isn't good, you will notice that it's not a good movie.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same with skiing. We've got the Oscar winner, but you've got the supporting actor, which is imperative. And that's your inside ski. Yeah. So we can load up our inside ski now because of the parabolics in the ski. And then my whole career, everyone was asking me, because it looked like my inside ski was on the snow. So in the pictures, all the video, oh yeah, we're not sure why she's losing speed onto the flat, because I was really good at on the steep. I was like a bull in a china shop. Yeah. Really good, very slow on the flats, which is where races are won and lost. And no one could work it out. My aerodynamics looked good. We had wind tunnel testing, so I knew my aerodynamics were good, but still I wasn't getting that kind of rocket fuel ejection that most people are getting. And it turns out, and I've only realised this now because there's a coaching tool that I use quite a lot, and it's a ski machine. It's called Infiniski. We're going to go there. Okay. I've been saying we need to go there for a long, long time.
You have, and I'm looking forward to it.
And why I love it is because your ski boots are clipped in, and it's kind of virtual skiing, but on this really big treadmill, lateral treadmill. So you're moving from side to side. It allows this movement, so that there is freedom of movement. Right. And what it does is attached to a computer. It's also a massive screen in front of you. It's what we're using a lot, actually, to get kids who are into gaming into sport. So it's kind of a soft transition, because they can play games where they're skiing around gates. And I'm like, okay, you've also done 18,000 turns in the last hour. But it's attached to a computer, and each of your skis is all the data's collected, so you can see how much pressure you have on your inside ski compared to your outside. So you can see when you're shifting it to get 50-50 how much power the slingshot effect, which is what we want, you get out of the turn. And that's a tool that if I'd had that when I was a racer, I would have had a much more scientific answer. And I would have been a lot better, because I would have understood. Like, I can see on that machine that it takes me a lot of intention and force to get pressure on the inside ski.
Yeah. So in terms of timings, I mean, this is only a guesstimate, of course, but how much difference do you think it would have made in terms of, a downhill?
I mean, well, if I looked at my splits, I was always competitive on the steeps. If I could have made up a second on the flats, then I would have
made a massive difference.
Been on the podium.
Yeah, and I think again, correlating that to what we do, it's taking the really important data set, so the top one, because there is so much data out there now in all facets of business. But really the key is trying to get those important things that you think will make a difference, and then using that in a positive way.
And we talked about this a lot before, and I use the cog analogy a lot, because you need to celebrate the areas of your business that are doing well, but so often when they're doing okay and they're rolling along in that process, we still put energy into them, whereas actually we don't have the confidence to say, over here, this is an opportunity for growth.
Absolutely.
This is our
Yeah.
red zone. Not red, shouldn't be red. It should be blue because red is negative.
Yeah.
This is our potential. Okay.
Yeah.
So if this one starts actually keeping up with the pace of all of the other cogs, then our business will go forward. But so often it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of we're doing well here, so
Yeah.
let's keep focusing on this area. Whereas actually you've got this limiting area
Absolutely
over
agree.
here.
Yeah.
And like I said, in pictures, I looked good. My feeling, I didn't know that I
Mm.
wasn't doing that. So that was my area of opportunity. Whereas and if I'd had data to back that up,
Yeah.
not just my feeling,
Yeah.
then it would have been really much easier for me to change and improve.
Yeah. So tell me about. I'm also interested about adrenaline, because adrenaline. There's lots of
Yeah.
studies in football at the
Yeah.
moment about taking penalties, and you see some
Yeah.
people that are kind of handling that pressure. I mean, how did you cope with that when you were going through it? Because it's one of those things that's really difficult to control,
Yeah.
isn't it? Nerves and adrenaline, because you can actually use that as a positive as well
Hmm.
in some respects.
I had a really interesting journey with nerves throughout my career. When I was younger, I really didn't care. I raced against boys. There was no gender racing. It was a win-win for me because when I won, I felt great. But when I didn't win, everyone said, oh, you're a girl, you're not supposed to meet the boys. Then I started doing very well, becoming the best in Britain. I found the pressure quite hard to handle. As a young teenager, I would throw up in the start gate. I couldn't sleep the night before. I really suffered with that expectation that I would win. And this is a sport that has tiny margins between a great result and a straddle. So actually, you can never predict accurately who's going to win. It's not like the controlled sports out there at all. So I really struggle with that. Then I started to do a huge volume of races when I got to 15, 16 to get over the nerves. And I became almost too chilled. And I remember I had a psychologist try and work out how to get my fear level higher. And so I used to visualize pigeons in the start gate because the only thing in the world that scared me, unfortunately, not fortunately, I've done all the extreme sports to try and heighten that adrenaline level. And I'm fine with skydiving and bungee jumping and everything like that. But it was pigeons when I was plugged in that gave me that heightened heart rate. So I used to think about being in a room with pigeons in the start gate, and that got my heart rate high enough. Because like you said, you can't go from 0 to 6th gear straight away. It's like a car. But when you open that wand, you need to be ready to charge. So actually you want to be a bit nervous.
Yeah.
And that's a thing I talk a lot about, is this perception of fear and how our society says that fear is really negative. I think fear is imperative because without fear, we're staying in our comfort zone.
Yes.
And I know you know this, but I spent 8 years of my life when I had the ability to win a World Cup, choosing not to be my best, choosing to be 80% of myself and keeping 20% in my back pocket to self-validate why I wasn't winning, because I was so scared that if I did go 100% and I didn't win, I'd have to admit to everyone in the UK what it felt like and all my sponsors that I wasn't good enough. So I chose to underperform. And that was because of fear of failure and fear of letting other people down. So I see fear as really important.
Positive.
In fact, so important. I don't know if you know this, but I'm writing a book on fear.
Oh, are you?
Normalizing
Amazing.
fear in children. So it's quite a different book.
When you say normalizing fear,
Normalizing. So talking about how important it is to
actually
feel
be
fear.
okay with it.
The hardest thing I hear as a coach around young children is parents going, why are you scared? You shouldn't be scared. First of all, in skiing especially, they should be scared.
Yeah.
We're throwing ourselves
Yeah.
down a mountain. This is where fear comes into it. It's about respecting the mountain, but it's also about pushing them through that limit and knowing that fear is great. Like the butterfly, the book's called Turning Belly Butterflies into Dragon Wings, because those butterflies you feel, like coming in today, anything you care about the result of, you should be scared.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't start or end at any time in your life. It should always be there. We should always have that kind of element of pushing our boundaries. So I'm writing this book, and it's for young kids, especially post-pandemic. We've noticed that a lot of people are sandbagging, staying in their comfort zone, haven't got the confidence around themselves or in themselves to make mistakes. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned from all my mistakes and my failings, and I think that's what makes me the best mum, business owner, TV presenter I can be.
Yeah, because we all make mistakes, and
Yeah.
I think there is a fear of failure.
Yeah.
And if you look at the American culture, they embrace fear and see it as a positive, because actually, how do you carry on learning through life?
So that's quite interesting, because I
Yeah.
do keynote speaking, and I'm getting so many jobs in America,
Yeah.
because America is at the forefront of having teams of people with you, underneath you, who you can lead, to have that confidence
Yeah.
to make mistakes.
Well, I mean, part of what we do is the whole agile kind of process of building, and it is all about what we call fail fast.
Yeah.
So that whole way of building software, which we've done with Stratium, is about learning and getting feedback from clients and then improving what you're trying to do. So we're always trying to improve. So there's a similarity there. I'm also interested to know more about sleep, because I think sleep is the big thing at the moment they're exploring with elite athletes. Have you done any work on that? What's
I
your
was
view on it?
massively superstitious
Right.
as an athlete. I used to count back 9 hours from when I needed to get up, and that's when I needed to go to sleep. Now, when we're getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning, it became very antisocial in my life, and it was just that's what I felt like I needed. I mean, I also only wore seamless turquoise underwear, and I had all these crazy superstitions. I mean, that's also aerodynamic, so there was a bit of that.
Yeah.
But I was oversleeping, and actually at the end of my career I used to have a sleep monitor that I slept with, and we did all these various tests where I stayed up, and I limited my sleep, and it meant that I got into level 3 or the deep level sleep much quicker, because actually lying in bed for 9-10 hours, most people don't actually get to the depth of sleep they need in order to recover. They just stay at level 1. I mean, this is also quite in-depth sleep analysis.
It's fascinating.
But I think it's really important because we get all these data from watches saying how many hours we've slept, and actually some of the high-level watches and monitor systems tell you when you've got into that movement where you're not having the rapid eye, where you're really deep.
My wife's
deep
obsessed
sleeping.
by it.
Yeah, but it can give
and
you.
She
a
always
lot
blames
of
me as
confidence.
well.
But it can also see. I don't wear it during the winter because I'm worried that I'll wake up, have to perform on telly, have to do a camera run, and my data will tell me that I'm not ready, and I have to do it anyway. So I do wear it when I'm more in control of my life. It's weird, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Because then I want the data that supports it. Whereas when I know that I've got to charge anyway, I don't want to watch saying, Shemi, you're not up for it today.
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, what's interesting is they're saying that there is quite a big, the old marginal gains thing, which a lot of people don't always believe. I remember who's the famous cyclist that Bradley Wiggins is saying that the David Brailsford stuff is like rubbish now.
Yeah.
But they reckon there's quite a lot of improvements through understanding sleep patterns. So
I do think there is that importance. And I think, you look at a mother, a new mum and dad, what they can achieve on no sleep at all. We have all these perceptions that we need all this sleep in order to function. But actually, I think we need adrenaline, we need passion, and then we can get that sometimes without so much sleep. But it is, I also think it's very, very individual.
Yeah. So that's quite comes on to my next question, really, which is if you were going to look at the 4 or 5 things, if you were racing now, what would you focus on in terms of those, adrenaline, fear, sleep patterns? Could you kind of prioritize them in things that you would look at?
A lot of them, because it was very easy for me to control being as physically strong. I love working out. I love pushing myself in the gym. I love all the training. It was what's in here that was way more important. So I would do a lot more work on having the freedom to enjoy what I was doing and not see it as a career, because I think then I would have lost my need to be a perfectionist, which is a massive limiting factor of my own personality. I want to be perfect. Don't choose ski racing if you want to be perfect.
Right.
You've got to be able to fly down a mountain. It's not about not making mistakes. It's about making mistakes and how quickly you can recover from those mistakes. And those were the best runs that I had. So I think I would put a lot more thought into my thoughts.
But just to challenge you on that last statement, because isn't it true of a lot of elite athletes that they always are aspiring, even, Ronaldo's and Messi's, they're always looking to get better. So they never see themselves as being
So yes,
perfect.
I totally agree. The pursuit of excellence is very different from the pursuit of perfection.
Right, okay.
The pursuit of perfection is very limiting.
Right.
Because you're scared to make mistakes. Whereas the pursuit of excellence, you know that you've got to try something different that other people aren't trying, and it might not work, or it might work and it will give you the edge. So I think that they're very different words. And actually, we always think, be perfect, right? And actually, I think it's not. So I want to replace the feeling that we have of looking for perfection in society with looking for fear. We want to look for fear.
Okay.
We want to look for things that
Very
make us
interesting.
scared.
If you were to sort of say those 4 or 5 things, do you know whether there's any work going on in terms of correlating that data and trying to look at the top few things of each of those data sets that would give you a kind of a real competitive or winning edge?
I think there's a lot being changed with biomechanically how to get your muscles working quicker in the mornings at cold and at altitude. So there's a lot of use of lasers now that wasn't around.
Right.
And obviously that is all data, what are you putting into the muscles? What are they reacting with? The sleep data is what everyone's looking at, especially when there's a high volume of skiing at altitude during the winter.
Yeah.
And you see some athletes who look like they're fine pulling out of races because then they can't push themselves to their limit because they've seen that physically they are not ready. So I think the data is definitely helping. It's helping people put themselves first physically a lot of the time, whereas we just used to do it until you'd blow out, really.
Yeah. So it's interesting. What about things like equipment like skis? Because obviously, 20 years ago, massive change.
A really interesting one this season is, and the first World Cup of the year for the women, we had an athlete disqualified, a good friend of mine, Norwegian athlete, for having fluorocarbons in her skis. Obviously, we know the technology in skis has changed loads in the last 20 years. It makes it much more accessible for people to get into the sport because the skis are easier to turn than when you and I learnt with the straight up and down skis. But now, because of sustainability and because of the health of technicians, they're moving away from fluorocarbons on the basis of skis, which are the fastest wax that you can put on skis. And a ski at World Cup levels probably had 100 hours of waxing
Incredible,
and skiing
isn't it?
on it before it's ready to go. And so FIS have decided correctly that is not good for the environment, for getting into the snow. It's not good for the technicians who spend those 100 hours breathing it in, even if they're wearing masks. So they've banned it. They've banned it, but they've only created, you're very interested in this, Peter, 2 machines that can detect the level that is small enough to ban the athlete. So the technicians do not have access to this machine. We don't want everyone to buy new skis because that's not sustainable. And we don't need that. The athletes race maybe 15 minutes on a ski. You don't need a new ski after that.
No.
So they try to strip the bases of the fluorocarbons. And that's what everyone done. This athlete in particular, 10 days before she raced on this ski, had that ski tested and it was perfect. It passed. Something happened in the day of the race where suddenly that ski had a huge amount of fluorocarbons on, and all the technicians come forward and said he used old ski straps to put them together, which had maybe a residue of fluorocarbon wax on. But that's what's really hard because the testing, the data is there and it should be there, but the testing machinery isn't accessible enough for people to use all the time or to understand the variability of where, if you use an old brush, for instance, one of the ones you've used last season, you'll get disqualified. And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of effort that goes into these races. And my friend was really distraught because people started saying she was a cheater. She is as far from that as you could be.
Yeah.
This was just a
Interesting
data mistake.
So, and there's a lot of that, obviously, you see this all the time in sports like Formula One, for example, where data is so important, but also the controlling of that data is also important.
Definitely.
To make sure that people aren't sort of going above and beyond the kind
because
of
you've got to find the
sport.
limit, right? You're looking for your competitive edge. That's totally understandable. But in order to do that, you've got to be able to have access to all the machinery, in my opinion.
Yeah.